All right. All right, so we're live. So hello and welcome to the SAT live stream. I'm going to be doing one section here, section 3 from practice test number 10. If you check the description of this video, I believe I posted a link to the site where you could get all of these tests. So I did say it was going to start at 12:30, so I will give people time to join and I will start doing this test in 7 minutes. Okay, so just give people a chance to join, and if anyone is here, always welcome to comment, ask questions, and I'll give you as much advice as I can about preparing for the SAT. Now, I guess while I am waiting for people to join in, just a little background here. I've been teaching high school math for 10 years, been on YouTube for just about the same time. And the SAT math is not like most of the math you're doing day to day in school, meaning that you're going to be using strategies that you normally don't do on regular math exams where you have to show all your work. This is more about timing and just being able to do these questions as quickly and accurately as possible. Okay, so that's going to be the theme here. If I do have time to show more than one way, I will, and I'll kind of explain why I'm doing things the way I am doing them. But yeah, that's going to be one of the themes here for this video. So let's just see here what so we do have some people on. So once again, thank you for joining, anyone who did join us. And I will give a little bit of time here before I start doing the actual questions. But I just want to view real quick and make sure that everything is intact. But once again, if you don't have the practice test that I'm looking at, it is practice test number 10. And I put a link to this video in the description of this stream. So let us just see here. So the live, I just don't want to create a feedback loop. I want to just double check this here. If you don't have the practice, all right, let's make sure that's muted. And yes, I did put a link to this. Okay, so people will have a chance to follow along. All right, so I guess what I'll do is I can just get this started here. I guess, don't have any more background stuff to add. We have the math in front of us, so we will get to it. All right. So starting off here, this section here is, let's see, section 3 is 25 minutes to complete, and we're going to be doing 20 questions. So we'll just start these questions now, and I will keep in mind that we have to do this within 25 minutes. So this first question here, what value of z satisfies the equation above? Just looking at this one, they usually start you off with something nice. But one piece of advice here is that even though they're starting you off with something nice, I would make sure that you don't rush. Like, you want to go fast, but don't go so fast that you mess up a question like this, because it is possible. Anything's possible on the day of the test. So here I would move that z over. Z minus z cancels. The right side is 0. And now 2z minus 1z is just 1z plus 1. And now to solve for z, just subtract 1 on both sides. So z is equal to negative 1, which matches up with choice B. So first question, not too bad. Okay, now this one, let's see. We have a TV with the price of $300 is to be purchased with an initial payment of $60, weekly payments of $30. So which of the following can be used to find the number of weekly payments W required to complete the purchase, assuming there's no taxes or fees? All right, so just looking at this one, what you should notice is that the initial payment is the fixed. So I'm kind of thinking like y equals mx plus b here. So this is kind of like the rate, and this is the fixed amount. I know it's our y-intercept if we're talking about graphs, but for word problems, this is what we're thinking here. So the total price of the TV is $300. The initial payment is the fixed amount. Okay, but then how much they're paying per week is $30. So plus 30 times W. So now scanning the answer choices here, let's just see. So initial payment of 60 plus 30 times W. It looks like these got flipped here. So let me just flip those, and it would be 30W plus 60. So 2 is going to be choice C. All right, so this is one of those linear equation word problems, but the fixed amount or the initial amount is your constant at the end, and the rate here is the coefficient of x, or in this case, w. All right, so up to this section over here. For question 3, we're given, and once in a while, keep in mind here, we don't get to use a calculator for any of these questions. I don't know if I shouted that loud enough, but we don't get to use a calculator here. So let's see. Now for question 3, we have shipping charges for merchandise weighing this many pounds, and this is how much it costs to ship. So the table above shows shipping charges. All right, we have an online retailer. So there's a lot of fluff to these questions, but here's the important part. There is a linear relationship between the shipping charge and the weight of the merchandise, which function can be used to determine the total shipping charge f of x in dollars for an order with a merchandise weight of X pounds. So for this one here, we have to be careful. One thing I would do, it is linear, but the trap to this question is thinking that the linear function is starting at 0, 0. That's not necessarily the case for this situation. So I wouldn't just say 1694 divided by 5. So 1694 divided by 5. I'm not just doing that because, once again, if I were to just divide this by this, then this would be assuming it's direct, that it's coming right out of the origin. But that's not the case here. So what I would do is just find the slope between these 2 points. Like, let's say here I'm doing 2189 minus 1694, and I'm dividing by 10 minus 5. Okay, and I don't get a calculator. So considering that, let's just zoom out a bit to give space. I would have to subtract this the long way. So I'm doing this minus 1694. So I get a 5. I have to borrow here. I get 18 minus 9 is 9. And then this is really just 10 minus 6 is 4. So 495. So the top is 495. And now we're dividing by 5. So just looking at the answer choices, I could see that 0.99 is the most reasonable. But if I had to divide this, 0.99, it's fine. You know, if I had to do that off to the side, you know, let's say 4.95 divided by 5. 5 goes into 4 0 times. It goes into 49 9 times, and that's minus 45. Remainder 4 here. I don't know why I wrote a 5. 9 minus 5 is 4. You bring this down, and then 5 goes into 45 9 times evenly. So that's why it's exactly 0.99. So these answer choices are out. But now, how do I know that in this case it's choice B and not choice A? Is that the problem with choice A would be if I were to plug in 5, like f of 5 equals 0.99 times 5. We just did that stuff over here, that 4.95 divided by 5 was this. So if I multiply 0.99 times 5, that would reverse it, and it would give me 4.95. And you see that doesn't match the shipping charge of 1694. There's an extra constant that we would have to consider here. Okay, so if we had to actually write a function for this, which is not the actual question, what I would do is I would subtract 495 from 1694. So if we did this is extra. That would tell us what our constant is at the end. Okay, like we could use the formula y equals mx plus b. We could write the equation of the line. But once again, this one, A, is no good because if you just plug in 5, you get 495, which doesn't match the shipping charge. Okay, like the difference here is not part of the question, but we could find that if we wanted to, like what is the constant that's being added? And then it would give you all the other points here. All right, so moving on to the next one. And I'm not necessarily, once again, I'm not going through all that because time is money. You know, you don't want to spend too much time on one question. All right, so here, let's see. We have the line in the XY plane above represents the relationship. Oh, and Noob Killer, oh my God, you did this SAT test. Now you can understand in depth what you did wrong. I'm glad you're joining. Thank you for the comment. I hope these explanations are good. And if anything doesn't make sense, just, let me know. Okay, so the line here above represents the relationship between the height h of x. Okay, so y equals h of x. I would just label this here. This is the height. Okay, so this is the height in feet and the base diameter x. So this is our base diameter. You don't actually have to write it in, but I just want us to think about what it means in the context of the question. So for cylindrical Doric columns in ancient Greek architecture. So how much greater is the height? So here's the actual question. How much greater is the height of a Doric column that has a base diameter of 5? So when x equals 5, I'm just thinking over here that y is 35. So how much greater is the height of the column that has a diameter of 5 versus the height of a Doric column with a base diameter of 2 feet? So if we just look here, once again, the heights are the y values in the context of this question here, how they labeled everything. So we're just doing the y value 35 minus the y value 14. And that's going to give us 21, which is choice C. Okay, so this is a lot to read, and there's a graph, and we have to interpret it and go back and forth. But just once again, when they tell you like what each thing means and they don't write it in, it can't hurt to write it in so you know what you're looking for. So you're really just subtracting the y values when x equals 2, x equals 5. The math itself is not difficult. I would just say knowing what math to do is the hard part. So that is where you would spend your time to think. Okay, so for this one, x is greater than 0. They're telling us this because the square root of x squared is really absolute value x or plus minus x. So they're telling us x greater than 0 because that allows us to say that square root of x squared is equal to x. All right. So that is, once again, you could only say square root of x squared equals x if x is greater than 0. If x could be anything, then it's absolute value x. Okay, so this is like when x is like, you know, like in elements of, actually, I don't want to use crazy notation here, but that would just be if like we had a domain from negative infinity to infinity, then square root of x squared is absolute value x. Okay, but when x is greater than 0, then this is totally fine. So this you could break up as square root 9 times square root x squared. If you could just do that in your head, then great. But the square root of 9 is 3 because 3 times 3 is 9. And then the square root of x squared when x is greater than 0 is just x. So that's why this is choice A. Okay, cool. Please teach class 9. So Andrew, tell me a little bit more. What is class 9? I want to make sure that I know. And yeah, so just not sure what class 9 exactly is. Alrighty, so moving on here to question 6. So there's a few ways we could do this. But the first thing that I do, okay, is I look at that denominator. So a denominator equal to 0 is undefined, okay, which is bad. We don't want that. So just looking at this question, I say, all right, if that denominator x minus 1 were to equal 0, that would happen when x equals 1. So x equals 1 is not a solution. Okay, so I look for situations like what values of x can't work. So I know this is out. X can't be 1. Now, the fast way to do this, I look at the top and say, oh, that's a difference of two perfect squares. That factors to this because of this formula. A squared minus b squared equals a plus b times a minus b. So I could factor that nicely. Do the square root of the first term plus or minus the square root of the second term over x minus 1 equals negative 2. And now x minus 1 cancels. And we have x plus 1 equals negative 2. So now you can just subtract. Okay, and x equals negative 3. All right, now what I would do, so to be safe, because sometimes you could have two solutions to these questions. I would see, wait a minute, x equals negative 1. What happens if I plug that in? Well, I would get negative 1 squared minus 1 over negative 1 minus 1 equals negative 2. But this is a problem because this simplifies to 1 minus 1 on top is 0 divided by negative 2 equals negative 2. And that's not true. Okay, so that's how I know D is not it. Because you're like, oh wait, negative 3 is there, but not this. If you want to see the really long-winded solution to this, so let me see if I could do this. If like you really had to, you could cross multiply, but this I think is kind of a waste of time. X squared minus 1 equals negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2. You move everything to the left, you'd have x squared, you do plus 2x, and then after you subtract 2 on both sides, you would have minus 3. And this would factor to x plus 3 times x minus 1 equals 0. And that would give you roots of negative 3 and positive 1. If they had made this positive 1, that would be a better answer because it would trap the kids who do it this way. All right, but they didn't do that. Choice A is our answer. Okay. Oh, class 9 maths, like algebra? Yeah, I could add algebra down the line for sure. This is definitely more geared towards juniors in high school, usually, yeah, are taking this test. So, okay, let's see. So this one, the graph of f of x is shown. What is the value of f of 0? So this one here is easy if you know what to do. So f of 0 is really this means what is the y value? So what is the y value when x equals 0? Like that's another way of asking this question. You're like, all right, well, when x equals 0, that brings me here. That's the point 0, 4, so the y value is equal to 4. So f of 0 equals 4. 7 is choice D. Okay, so those are pretty straightforward if you know what it's asking. So you have to know your notation with what it means to go from f of 0 to what does f of 0 mean on the graph. And it's asking you in this phrase here, what is the y value when x equals 0? Okay. Oh, lines and angles. Well, maybe we'll have a lines and angle question pop up. Oh, here's some angles over here. And here's some lines. So, this touches on like year 9. I'm sorry, like class 9 or 9th grade math for sure. So question 8 is now a bit of geometry. So in the figure above, point B lies on segment AD. What is the value of 3x? Well, this symbol here we should look and notice is a right angle symbol, and it stands for 90 degrees. Okay, so we have a 90-degree angle here. And on this side, if we're on a straight line, that means this together has to be 90 degrees. Because straight lines, the measure of a straight angle is 180 degrees. All right, the way I know that, just think of a circle. Like if you were to, let me draw that a little nicer. If you were to draw a circle here, that was actually not that great. We'll do one more. That's a little better. A full circle is 360, but half of it is 180. Okay, so that's how I know. So that tells me if I do 2x plus 2x plus x, like this plus this plus this, has to equal 90. Okay, because this together, these three angles have to make 90. So now that's 5x equals 90. And now you divide both sides by 5. But just be careful here. X equals, if I do that on the side here, because it's no calculator, 5 goes into 9 once, remainder 4. And then 5 goes into 40 8 times. So it's 18. But be careful. All right, don't choose this. They're asking you what is the value of 3x. So that's where you're going to take the x equals 18. I'll leave a little space. And you multiply both sides by 3. So 3x would equal 18 times 3 is 54. But if you want to be safe, do the long multiplication. 4, carry the 2. Because 3 times 8 is 24. So 4, carry the 2. And then 3 times 1 plus 2 is 5. So 54. All right, so be careful here. They love questions like that. They do this so that you can't just plug stuff in. That's their inspiration for doing that. But I guess if you just had what is the value of 3x and you solve for x for all of these answer choices, like you could still get there if you don't know like this. But I think direct flight is just easier here. Oh, 9 is over here. Okay, so which of the following is an equation of line L in the xy plane above? So for this one, I'm thinking y equals mx plus b. All right, b is my y-intercept. That's where the line hits the y-axis, which is here. So right away, I'm saying, all right, b is equal to -4. M is my slope. But when you have a graph, the slope is better known as rise over run. Okay, so that's how I find it, the rise over run. So if I look to get from one point to the next, and notice the scale here that they're counting by ones going up, and they're counting by ones going over. So there's no like trickiness with like they're counting by 5s and counting by 10s or something. They're counting by ones for each square. So that means to get from this point to this point, I'm going down 1. So I'm rising -1. So I'm going down 1 over 1. So I'm going down 1 over 1. So my slope simplified is -1. So now I plug in, I have y equals -1 times x, or just -x I could write. So -x, and then b was -4. And then you look and you're like, oh no, my answer's not there. And that's because they're in standard form. So just solve for the constant, like you move x and y over. And now what we have is we have positive x, positive y, and then equals -4. So x plus y equals -4. Choice C is the answer. All right. Cool. Oh, I appreciate, so at Andrew Yadav, you like how I explain things. I appreciate that. I'm trying my best to just make these like as straightforward as I can, explain things, as efficiently as possible. I've been teaching now for 10 plus years, doing YouTube just as long. So I'm like at a comfortable spot of my career, and I just really try my best to, make you all understand it as best as possible and convince you all to try. I think that you're all trying right now. This far in advance is, definitely a good thing. So, all right, continuing on here. Let's see. The graph of the parabola is here. If the graph crosses the y-axis at 0k, what is the value of k? Okay, so what is the value of k? So for this, if we want to find out the value of k, notice here that our x is equal to 0. So what we could do is plug x equals 0 into the equation. Y equals, we have 2 times 0 squared plus 10 times 0 plus 12. And now that'll tell you y equals, this stuff cancels, and you're left with just 12. So when x equals 0, y is equal to 12. So that would tell us here that k has to be equal to 12. All right, so we just plug 0 into the equation to find the y-intercept. And the y-intercept here, the graph is crossing at 12. All right, so 11 is one of those questions that's so easy it's difficult. If you know this formula, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, then you're in business. Because here, you just have to know that the center is your hk, and then this is your r value, the radius. So you plug in, you have x minus 5 squared plus y minus k is 7, and you're squaring it, equals the radius, which is 2. That's being squared. So 2 squared is equal to 4. So now I just look for this x minus 5, y minus 7, means we could get rid of these. And it's going to be choice A because the radius is squared. Choice C is like almost good, but the radius 2 was not squared. So 11 should be choice A. Okay, so moving on here. And let's see, question 12, we have this right triangle. And we're told these two triangles are similar. So that means that the sides are in proportion. So let's see, do you recommend learning, memorizing all formulas, or is there another method such as like what I did? I would say there's no other nice way to do question 11 on the SAT quickly. I would look at the formulas that they give you, and this is, yeah, all they give you. So you have to show up to the test just knowing that. Yeah, certain parts of math, like I know there's like that great debate of like, should math be memorized or are you only about understanding? Some parts of math you need to memorize. You know, like if you have a test about circles, like you should show up knowing all the circle formulas. You should kind of know why they work. The more you understand about them, the better. But there are some things you just have to know cold. And for this test, the circle equation is definitely one of them. Because it's easy points if you know this. If you don't know, it's annoying points to lose. So these two triangles are similar, and what that tells me here is that I can multiply everything here to get from here to here. So there's a few things we have to know for this question. We have to know, SOHCAHTOA, like the trig ratios. So our goal is to find cosine of E. So cosine, we should be thinking adjacent hypotenuse. So E is up here. So the side adjacent to E would be here. This would be the adjacent side. And the hypotenuse is always opposite of the right angle. But the trick is that since these triangles are similar, what that tells me is that this angle here is congruent to this angle. Because when you dilate something, when you make a similar triangle by dilating, the corresponding angles are congruent. See, like this is 90, this is 90. So that means the proportions that you set up in this triangle to this triangle, corresponding proportions are going to be equal. So the fast way to do this, I would just say, all right, cosine of E is going to be equal to cosine of B. And that's just going to be the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. So it's going to be 12 over 13. Okay, so we use the other triangle and we get choice B. Now, if you wanted to, what you could do is just pick any scale factor you want. All right, so let me just make sure I got this. Whoops, back up and running here. Let's say I do K equals 2. So I scale everything. 12 times 2 is 24. This is 10. This is 26. So if I were to do even 24, the adjacent over the hypotenuse, this reduces to 12 over 13. Okay, so either way, you're going to get choice B. So you could scale up the sides, anything you want, and then do the ratio, or just use the original triangle. Okay, question 13. So, let's see. You got 11 right from a mixture of, let me see, 11. Yeah, memory and guessing. Yeah, for sure. Like just having that formula ready helps a lot. Like it's one of those formulas that's like very good to have. So here we have a graph of the function. So what I'm imagining here, I'm like, okay, graph of this function, it's a parabola. So no matter where we are, they're telling us it has two x-intercepts. So that's two roots. So what we're trying to find here is the distance between them. So for this one, I would factor. Okay, so I would factor and then set equal to 0. So this, I would say it's going to factor to x plus 4 times x plus 1. And I'm setting it equal to 0 because the x-intercepts are where the function is equal to 0, where the y value of the function is equal to 0. So x-intercepts means the same thing as roots. You could say zeros, and so on. So there's a lot of ways of phrasing this. So this factors I know because I need two numbers that have a sum of 5 and a product of 4. So that's where x plus 4, x plus 1 comes from. And now the roots, you just set them equal to 0. X equals negative 4. And this one will give you a root of x equals negative 1. But now you got to be careful. How far away are they? And this, you might just be able to do it in your head. They're 3 away. But you're thinking about what is the space between these two numbers, okay, between these two roots. So this occurs at negative 4 and negative 1. And those are 3 away. Okay, so that's where the distance is coming from. And you can even see here, because this would be like negative 3, negative 2, that's 1, 2, 3 jumps. So choice C for 13. All right, this one here, you could solve this algebraically, but I would say algebra, is like not really like time friendly. Okay, that's supposed to be like a clock. Okay, so for algebra, I'm like, it's kind of a waste of time. So this I would plug in. What are the values of x that satisfy this? So if you plug in x equals 1, we try it out, we get square root of 4 times 1 equals 1 minus 3. And that's going to give us square root of 4 is 2 equals negative 2, which is not true. So this is out. So right away, like these two choices are gone. And then if you plug in x equals 9, now you're going to have square root of 4 times 9 is equal to 9 minus 3. And that gives you square root of 36. So that's 36. And the square root of 6, 9 minus 3 is 6. So this one works. So 2 only, right? If you do the algebra, right, the problem with doing the algebra is that if you go to do that, so you square both sides and you're like, all right, 4x equals x squared minus 6x plus 9, and you do all this work, you're going to get two values of x, but you're going to have to check anyway. So you might as well just check in the beginning and be done with it because they're telling you what the possible answers are. So just know what are all values of x that satisfy the given equation. And yeah, that's checking right away just saves you time. All right, 15 is another good question because in the system of equations above, a is a constant. For which of the following values of a does the system have no solution? So a system has no solution if the two linear equations involved are parallel. So like these two lines are parallel, which would mean they have the same slope. Okay, so what I need to happen is I need these to have the same slope. That line and that line need to have the same slope. And in order for them to have the same slope, I'm going to say here the ratio of the coefficients of x and y are equal. Okay, so this is a nice little trick. So the coefficient of x in the beginning is negative 3 over the coefficient of y is 1 would have to be equal to the ratio a over 2. Okay, because they're both in standard form. So then now you just solve and it's a equals negative 6. So choice A. If that didn't make sense, what you could also do is solve them for y. Like you could take that first equation here and you could say y equals 3x plus 6. And then you take the second equation and let's see, that would be 2y equals negative ax plus 4. So minus ax, and then divide both sides by 2 and you get y equals negative a over 2x plus 4 divided by 2 is 2. And then what you could do is you could target the slope. You could say, well, 3 has to be equal to negative a over 2. And then if you multiply everything by negative 2, that's going to give you negative 6 is equal to a. Same thing. All right, so choice A is our answer either way. Cool. So, yep, that's that part there. Moving on to the free response. So question 16, now we actually have to be able to do all the math. We can't really do guessing and checking. So we have a manufacturer shipping units of a product. Capital T is the total cost, okay? The total shipping cost is capital T in dollars. C units, all right, so C stands for closer location. Shipping F units to a farther location. So F for farther, C for closer. Total shipping cost was $47,000. So capital T is $47,000. And they told us 3,000 units were shipped to the farther location. So lowercase f is 3,000. Okay, so they gave us descriptions of each unit. They defined the variables for us. So that's why I'm defining this. And now just plug in, we want to find how many units were shipped to the closer location. So what's the value of C? So capital T is 47,000. And this is equal to 5C plus 12 times F is 3,000. So what I'm thinking in my head is I'm saying, all right, 12 times 3 is 36. So I have 5C plus 36, but there's 3 zeros. So I put 1, 2, 3 zeros. So that's how you do that kind of mental math. It's a nice trick to have. Right now, subtract 36,000. So you do that to both sides. And now this is gone, and we have 5C equals 0 minus 0 is the same, like 0 for these 3 rows, and then 7 minus 6 is 1, 4 minus 3 is 1. So now just divide both sides by 5. Okay, so I'll do that over here. 11,000 divided by 5, and 5 goes into 11 twice, and that gives you a remainder of 1. 5 goes into 10. So we have a remainder of 1, so twice, and then there's no more remainder. 5 goes into 0, 0 times, and it goes into 0, 0 times. Okay, so that's just doing the long division then. If you want to see all the steps to the long division, like you can do that, but once again, that's going to take time. 5 goes into 11 twice, and then you do 5 times 2 is 10. You bring this down, 5 goes into 10 twice, minus 10, you get 0. You bring down the 0, and 5 goes into 0, 0 times. 5 goes into 0, 0 times. Like it's just, that's where the 2200 is coming from if we show the long multiplication. All right, but once again, we don't have a calculator, so long multiplication, long division are things you should be comfortable with for numbers like this. All right, so, so C equals 2200. Let's actually circle the answer. So C equals 2200. Okay, that was the result after doing the division. All right, so this one here, absolute value equations. This is a nice question. So looking at this, we have A and B are solutions to the equations above. What is the value of absolute value A minus absolute value B? So for this one, you want to think, so in which situation do we have absolute value of something equals 5? Well, we have the absolute value of 5 equals 5, but we could also have the absolute value of negative 5 equals 5. So that means that the inside of the absolute value could be either 5 or the inside of the absolute value could be negative 5. So now you solve both equations, and that's your A and B values. So here you subtract 1, 2x equals 4 will tell you x equals 2. And then here, when you solve this one, you're going to get a different answer. You're going to get 2x equals negative 6, so x equals negative 3. So these represent your A and B values. So what is the absolute value of 2 minus negative 3? So now we subtract those. That's absolute value of 5, which is equal to 5. Okay, so this one here is going to be 5. If you did it the other way, like let's say, wait, this is A and this is B, it doesn't matter. If you did absolute value of negative 3 minus 2, that's going to give you absolute value of negative 5, which is still 5. So same answer. All right, that part doesn't matter. All right, so moving on here, let's see. Question 18, Juan purchased an antique that has a value of $200 at the time of purchase. Okay, or he purchased an antique that had a value of $200 at the time that he purchased it. Each year, the value is estimated to increase 10% over its value. The estimated value of the antique in dollars 2 years after purchase can be represented by 200A. Okay, so this is the formula you should know. A equals P times 1 plus R to the T power. So the amount that he has, capital A, after 2 years, first, the initial value is 200 times 1 plus R, the rate, is 10%, but we have to write that as a decimal. That's 10 out of 100, which is 0.1, like this. Okay, so that's 0.1. So we have 1 plus 0.1, but for 2 years. So this is going to give us 200 times 1.1 to the second power. Okay, but they're telling us that it can be expressed, so now this part here in purple, that the amount can be expressed as 200A, where A is constant. What is the value of A? Well, notice now that this equation here, so I just section this off. Notice there's a 200 on both sides, attached by multiplication. So we could divide both sides by 200. And now 200 over 200 cancels. So now A is equal to 1.1 squared. And that, I'm just thinking, like, all right, 11 times 11 is 121. So this would be 1.21. All right, so that's how I'm doing that part in my head. If you had to see why that's true, once again, when you're doing 1.1 times 1.1, you're essentially doing 11 times 11 is 121, but that's 1 2 decimal places to pay back. So I gotta go 1, 2 like this. All right, and that's how I know it's 1.21. So that's our answer to 18. Okay, question 19 is so easy it's difficult. Please don't, I would say here, don't solve for x and y. Okay, that is a waste of time. It's a time trap. What you want to do is you're trying to find the value of 5x plus 5y. So if you just add these together, so just add these equations, 2x plus 3x is 5x, 3y plus 2y is 5y, equals 1200 plus 1300 is 2500. So 5x plus 5y is just 2500. Okay, it solves very nicely. Students will fall victim to mechanical thinking and they'll just solve these like any other system. And then you're like, oh, let me build up 5x plus 5y. But no, you could just get it in one shot. All right, that saves you a ton of time. All right, question 20, and then that is it for this section. So let's see. We want to find the value of u minus t times u squared minus t squared. So what I'm noticing right away is this is a difference of 2 perfect squares. So I could factor, we have u minus t, and now this part I'll do in a different color. So this part here breaks down to u minus t times u plus t. Okay, difference of 2 squares factoring. And now just plug in. They told us u minus t is equal to 2. So that first part, let me just change colors here. So that first part, we could just say is 2 times u minus t is still 2. And then u plus t is equal to 5. And then 2 times 2 is 4 times 5 is equal to 20. And that is our solution to the last question. So, yep, that wraps up this section. So now I'll turn to the chat, give people time to ask questions. So any questions about 1 to 20, maybe you want something explained a little bit more in depth, because I did go kind of quickly through all of these. I think me stopping to, answer questions or talk to people in the chat, I might not have made it to the 25 mark. So maybe it would be better if I in the future, just don't talk, I just narrate my thoughts out loud and then do questions after. But does anybody have questions just immediately? So let me scan here and see. It could just be any questions about the SAT itself. But we had 32 people stop by, so nice. I'm trying to build up momentum. I had a ton of views for the AP Calculus exam. So anybody taking AP Calculus, just know next year I will be live streaming to get you all ready for the test. Also, I'm from New York. I had a lot of people go for the end of year New York exams for algebra, geometry, and algebra 2. 15 was a bit confusing. All right, let's take a look at 15. So, all right, I'm looking at 15. So I guess I'll have to ask you, why did Anakin betray the Jedi? I'm going to get to that one right after, Justin. Thank you for stopping by. That's a loaded question. I think that would probably need its own live stream. But a little bit more on 15, and then I'll talk about Anakin for a minute. Sure. Why not talk about Anakin? So here, the challenge I would say with 15 is you have to know a lot of concepts. You have to know that a system of linear equations is modeling 2 lines. So that's the first concept you have to know here. And then when there's no solution means that the lines involved will not intersect. Because if there was a solution, you'd have 2 lines intersecting and that represents the solution. Okay, that's the solution to the system. If there was a solution. But when there's no solution, that means the lines are never going to intersect. And the only kinds of lines that just don't intersect, assuming they're lines that go on forever, are parallel lines. And then you have to know, okay, parallel lines, same slope. But then how do you identify the slope when a line is in standard position? One way to do it would be to solve for y. Okay, so you could do exactly what I did over here. The first one is kind of easy to solve for y. It's medium to easy. You just add 3x to both sides. This one is a little bit more painful. Notice what I wrote over here that I did essentially minus ax on both sides. And then I divided everything by 2. Okay, I did some of that work in my head because, yes, I'm modeling moving quick at the SAT. So then you have, that's where the minus a over 2x plus 4 divided by 2. But then this formula would have to pop into your head. Y equals mx plus b. The coefficient of x is the slope. But that's a reliable way to do this question, but I think the coolest way is this way. That when you're in standard form like this, the ratio of the coefficients of x and y, if they're equal, those lines are parallel. And if those lines are parallel, they're not going to intersect and there's going to be no solution. So that's why I just did negative 3 over 1 equals a over 2. And boom, done. All right, so yeah, 15, usually 15, like the last multiple choice before they give you the long answer or like the free response, tends to be like one of the more challenging questions. Okay, they will put a hard question somewhere in the middle, but usually 15 is like a hard question. So why did Anakin betray the Jedis? Oof. Justin, that is a loaded question. It's a good question, though. It was ultimately fear. Fear of losing Padme, for sure. I think he didn't have the strongest foundation. You know, I've talked to plenty of people about this. I've talked to my wife about this, but it was almost like he needed more guidance, and they didn't really give him the guidance he needed. It was risky for them to take him in so early and to train him. They were, on the fence about it, especially like that he was so attached to his mother, and attachments for Jedi are very dangerous. It makes them, I guess, emotional and not able to handle the load and responsibility of being a Jedi. So his foundation was tricky to begin with. And then Palpatine is also like a master manipulator. He totally stoked those flames and got him to be terrified of losing Padme, which, yeah, it was ultimately like his fear and anger that did it. So why? I would say fear of losing Padme, and he had not the strongest support system to help him process his thoughts and his fears. Yeah, good question though. Yeah, fun question to answer. You know me so well. All right. Any other questions from people in chat? So we have 5. Yes, definitely a waste of midichlorians, for sure. He could have been the most powerful Jedi ever, but it was wasted. 10 out of 10 side quest. Oh, thank you, at Noob Killer. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Star Wars. That's my videos when it's just a straight run are more about getting the instructional. But live streams, if people ask me questions about my personal interests and it's something like I could talk about, like sure, I'll mention that. So any other questions, whether it be SAT questions or questions of even about the test prep, or it could be Jedi questions. I'm also okay with answering. You're welcome. But that is I know this one is going to be probably a bit of a shorter stream because the section was like not the longest. But I for the next one plan on doing the calculator section for sure. I like to take the test myself ahead of time to see all the twists and turns and see like which questions are most challenging, because it does shape how I'm gonna explain everything. But all right, well, the people who stopped by, I'm just gonna say thank you for stopping by. And yeah, session 1 out of 4, I want to do 4 at least for the SAT. I think I could definitely commit to 4. The next one I plan on doing Wednesday, same time, to give people on the West Coast a chance. But I appreciate people stopping by and supporting the live stream. Once again, I don't have a lot of SAT math content, so I do need to build it up before I think I could get the following. But I know there is an August SAT, so I imagine people are going to be on YouTube more frequently in August. So I figured, why not live stream for one of the biggest tests that all the high schoolers take. So thank you all for stopping by. And yes, enjoy the rest of your, I believe this is Monday, right? Yep. Enjoy your Monday. So thank you.